Prisoner rights were one of the main ideas in this course. Prisoners have rights because they are citizens of the United States just like the rest of society. Constitutional rights protect U.S. inmates who are in prison, but there are certain exceptions that apply to them due to the fact that they have violated the law. Prisoners have the right to almost all of the amendments except the Fourth Amendment, which protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. This constitutional amendment was taken away due to safety concerns for the prison. For example, inmates would be able to hide contraband easier and get away with it fairly easy if this amendment applied to them. That could lead to riots, violence, injuries, and even death for inmates or correctional officers. Habeas corpus is another big idea that we learned about in this course. Every case that we've read about and learned about started with habeas corpus. It's a two-step process that every inmate in the cases that we learned about had to file a petition, which is the first step of the process. And the second step is after the inmate filed the petition is then filed against the person of authority. So in those cases that we learned about, it would be either a certain correctional officer or the correctional facility itself. Following proper procedures is another big idea that we've learned about throughout this course. It is very important and can influence an officer's experience in the courtroom in many ways. Correctional officers should be aware of all the rules and abide by them while they're on duty. They cannot make mistakes in the courtroom or it could lead to loss of their jobs as well as getting the department in trouble. To ensure that an officer's experience in the courtroom goes well, they should prepare ahead of time. They should be knowledgeable when it comes to knowing and understanding all the amendments of the U.S. Constitution, and they should also be knowledgeable of any updated laws that may have changed. An officer must have a complete understanding of what the case is about and be knowledgeable of all of the facts that are in the case. There are certain policies and procedures that could lead to that are used in correctional facilities. Safety, security, and sanitation are policies that every correctional facility should have and follow proper protocol to ensure that the policies are in effect 24/7. Security is one of the most important things when it comes to correctional facilities because of the fact that the officers are surrounded by offenders who can be dangerous and violent. Inmate rights are another procedure that correctional officers have to abide by. They cannot violate the rights of any inmate. Some other policies that could be put into place include heightened intake procedures to identify problematic inmates, improve communication channels between correctional staff, separation of gang members, ensuring that correctional officers always have backup support, instruction, and training for officers for certain situations. Ethical behavior is another policy that every correctional officer should follow. Their jobs can be very difficult at times, especially when dealing with inmates who are violent or disrespectful to them. Ethical behavior is super important because they must act with integrity and always do the right thing, even when they are being disrespected by an inmate. That is part of their job and what they are trained for. If a correctional officer does not show ethical behavior, it could come back to them either in the courtroom or from the Department of Corrections, and depending on what type of ethics they violated, they could potentially lose their job or become suspended. Ethical behavior is also very important in the courtroom if a correctional officer has to attend court. They have the responsibility of providing accurate and honest information and facts. Therefore, they cannot state any false information on what they are testifying. The court process is another thing that we've learned in this class. The court process has basically 5 different steps. The first step is obviously the arrest. After the arrest is made, the defendant is detained in a jail cell until their initial appearance. At the initial appearance, the judge will go over the defendant's name and address. They will also go over the crime that they're being charged with. After that, the defendant has the preliminary hearing. During the preliminary hearing, the judge hears the evidence that is presented by the defense and prosecution. The judge then will decide if it is enough evidence to prove that the defendant committed the crime or not. The arraignment is next. At the arraignment, the defendant enters a plea of guilty, not guilty, or no content. The judge will then set a date for sentencing at the arraignment. Lastly comes the trial. This is where the judge decides the innocence or guilt of the defendant. If the defendant is found not guilty, the judge will determine sentencing for the defendant.